All right. Chapter 18. Evie. Dead. I must be dead. Evie hadn't stopped screaming. Her throat had grown raw as she fell, waiting for the impact of the ground, but instead she'd landed against something soft and dewy. Then the darkness had faded, and when she finally brought herself to open her eyes, she was surrounded by a sea of bright, pale blue light and countless little clouds. The sky. She was in the sky, but she had fallen downward. How could that be possible? Another body landed beside her, causing her to bounce again, and this time she couldn't help it. She laughed. She was on a godforsaken cloud, and there was clearly no other appropriate reaction. Sage, are you hurt? The graveled rasp of his voice made her breathe a sigh of relief, and a warm sliver of comfort eased into her heart that at least if she was dead, they were dead together. When she looked at him, she laughed again. His hair was sticking up in every direction. She'd never seen it so much. I'm well, but your hair has seen better days, she responded casually, biting her lip when he started shuffling frantically to smooth it. Leaning over the side of the cloud to see what was below, she felt her face prickle with trepidation. A field of dandelions. She swallowed and shook the memories away. Memories of her brother, Gideon's screams, of her mother's disappearance, of the day her childhood ended. Abruptly, traumatically, tragically. These were the small moments of life when one's innocent view of the world was corrupted, when the magic curtain was ripped away to reveal something sinister or ugly, a moment when one stopped believing and viewed the world with different, weary eyes. It was a natural part of life, one of the rules of growing older, but she'd never been very good at adhering to rules. Yet she'd grown older, but she still had faith in goodness, in people, in magic. The soft grass below looked even greener than the patch of land outside the cave, like a mossy cushion. Standing on shaky legs, she walked toward the edge of the cloud, mesmerized, ignoring the boss's warnings. Sage, don't you dare! She jumped. The distance to the ground was farther than she'd anticipated. She let out a panicked cry as she angled herself to roll, but the impact was soft, like the only thing below the grass was more grass, no hard earth beneath. She let out a very unladylike oof. The boss landed gracefully a few feet away from her, because of course he did, she thought with a roll of her eyes. He did everything seamlessly. It was why she liked to see him so ruffled. And truly, he was a mess. Shirt untucked, hair out of place, pants wrinkled, and a bitter frown marring his features as he stared at her in disbelief. I have to wonder, he bit out, stalking over to her and pulling her up to stand. Do you have absolutely no care for your own well being, or are you simply so naive to the world that you believe it will never harm you? She flinched and he let go, his dark eyes softening with regret. But it was too late. He'd called her naive, and it couldn't have inflamed her more if he'd set her on fire. The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could halt them. I've been hurt plenty by the world, by people, by men. Just because you bury your bad experiences behind revenge schemes and scorn doesn't mean that I must join you in your misery. Being a cynic doesn't make you wise, it makes you a coward. She put her hands out and shoved him away from her, and he stumbled, gobsmacked for a moment. And then his eyes darkened, his fury matching her own. Oh, now you've done it. Don't find his murderous rage so entrancing, Evie. He prowled forward like a predator, and she stumbled back with every step until she bumped into a wall of blue sky. It was a barrier, smooth beneath her touch. She didn't have time to study it further, as he was already looming over her. It's not cynicism, you natural disaster, he snarled. It's realism. It's knowing people and the elements well enough to realize that they are always against you. I don't want you hurt. I don't want you to die, which is very fucking frustrating when you act in ways that could easily accomplish both. Oh, this isn't condescension. This is protectiveness. That's a little dramatic. I jumped from a cloud, for goodness sake. She'd be in more danger having a snowball fight with tissues. The whole disagreement was beginning to feel silly. That's a lovely thing for you to say. Thank you for caring. She awkwardly reached up to pat his shoulder, shrinking when he angled closer, not to mention getting a little excited by it, if she was completely honest, and completely pathetic. You are the most frustrating person I've ever met, and I work with hardened criminals, he shuddered. And interns! She didn't think those two groups were necessarily equivalent, but judging by the flare of his nostrils, it was likely not the safest time to point that out. Still, it felt a little like a compliment. She licked her lips as she said candidly, Well, I wouldn't be so frustrating if you didn't incense me so. His chest was moving rapidly, his pupils dark and large. His words came from low in his throat. I've incensed you? What do you think you've done to me? Her lips parted on a gasp at the heavy tension suddenly between them. It felt like the air was too thick, hard to breathe it in, hard to breathe at all. I annoy you? She said, attempting to divert this pressure, desperate to. Thick hair fell over his eyes as he shook his head, hand raising slowly, too slowly, to caress the skin of her cheek with his knuckles. Light, like a whisper of a touch. It triggered a memory, vague and blurry through her poisoned state after she'd eaten the sleeping death fruit. There had been a warm voice through the blurriness, and another whisper-light touch against her own knuckles. I command you, as your employer, to wake up. He shook his head again, his hand curling around the back of her neck, lightly pulling her closer. Their lips were scant inches apart. She could practically taste the sugar from his cauldron brew on his breath. She should move away, or he should, but neither of them did. I incense you, she breathed, and then nearly buckled when she heard a low sound in the back of his throat, almost like a groan. Completely. His lips were nearly on her when the blue sky-like barrier around them began to shake and move. They jumped apart, breathing heavily and red-faced. She held fast to his tensed arm as they stumbled backward. What is that? The blue sky around them began to move as something that had been camouflaged slowly revealed itself. A creature so tall, the clouds floated near its mouth, which was now visible, displaying 2 rows of razor-sharp teeth. Oh no. The end of the rhyme. The monster's next meal. The villain said beside her, his chest still heaving. The beast from the story had revealed itself at the most inopportune moment. Evie gulped before saying, Do you think it's married to that ending? Yeah. Time. 9:01. That was a short chapter. I'm going to have no concept of time this entire stream. I want you to know. Bird show. I may have eaten a little nibble of something. It's a little nibble. So time is not going to exist. Chapter 19. The Villain. As far as interruptions went, it was well timed. If the monster coming out of the blue sky had revealed itself even a moment later, Tristan would have lost control. and there was no telling what atrocity he would have committed next. Part of him still wanted to find out. Boom! The beast fully formed before them. A shrieking howl came from its large mouth, so loud it made them both stumble back. Its skin seemed to be made up of cloud and marble in equal parts, its face grotesque, yet almost human, save for the horns growing from its giant head. Misted clouds surrounded its temples, almost like a crown, and they stayed perfectly in place, the way Kingsley's crown often did. When it slammed its fist against the ground, the entire hidden oasis shook. Who disturbs me? The monster howled. Good. This was good, actually. Dealing with mortal danger was far preferable to ruminating on what he'd almost done. Why is the phone moving? It's sliding that way. Anyway, pissing me off. He would instead remain fixated on the monster's horns, its death-like stare, not on the gasp that had sounded out of Sage's lips mere moments ago, a sound that would surely haunt him in his dreams, his nightmares, should he escape the current situation, of course. He'd gone far too long without betting a woman. It was the only reasonable explanation for losing control of himself so thoroughly. It had been 6 excruciating months of abstaining for no particular reason, it seemed, in this moment. The monster slammed its fist into the ground once more, snapping Tristan back to reality, back to all that truly mattered to him. Revenge, villainy, murder, staying alive. He sucked in a breath, feeling focused. That's better. I said who? The monster cried. It was a rhetorical question. Surely they both knew this. And yet that didn't stop his assistant from cupping her hands around her mouth and screeching like she was speaking to an elderly grandparent. Evie Sage! Tristan gawked at her before rubbing at his cheek. You forgot to curtsy, he said incredulously. She shrugged and started to dip, but halted when he gripped her waist. Are you having an episode? He needed migraine potion and a very long, very cold bath. The creature was still reeling from Sage's response, furrowing its. Well, it didn't have eyebrows, but Tristan imagined they would be furrowed should they have been present. Back away, he warned it, praying the monster wouldn't see the emptiness in the threat. He could feel from its stillness inside him that his magic wouldn't work here. He had no means of protecting them, no means of protecting her, but he'd hardly have needed to, because instead of remaining safely hidden behind him, Sage circled around and presented herself to the monster, dropping into a deep curtsy, smiling wide before yelling loudly, Hello! Was she attempting to make a polite introduction to a creature that would likely try to eat them? Sage, he hissed. What in the God's names are you doing? What's your name? She smiled at it. Yes, of course she did. But instead of eating her whole, the creature dropped to its large knees, knocking dandelion bristles through the air like party confetti and extending one of its long gray hands, covered in purple markings that looked like vines. Tristan lurched forward, ready to do battle, but instead he stopped in frozen awe. One large finger was slowly extended. It was enormous compared to the size of Sage's hand, but it was extended nonetheless. She jumped, delighted, as she wrapped both hands around its finger and shook. I have no name, the creature said slowly, pulling its finger back, anger fading from its tone. I am part of this world, and by natural law I can take none. Sage frowned. Well, that's a silly rule. Who came up with that? The monster frowned back at her, and then it chortled. "Sage," Tristan whispered. "Do you remember that time I confiscated those mushrooms from the interns? This is beginning to resemble that." She scrunched her nose and scratched the side of her head when she looked at him. "Those made you hallucinate." "Precisely." The creature's voice boomed again. "The rules were made by the architects of this world. The creators. Gods, you call them," it said. Sage gave it her rapt attention. "They made every corner of this world what it is. Every person, every living thing exists because of their sacrifices." "Oh, they did a very good job." Sage nodded encouragingly. He could practically see the thoughts spinning behind her eyes. "I'm a big fan of, um, the trees." She seemed calm, but she was nervous. He could tell by the way she wrung her hands. She had no need to be, because after the compliment, the creature looked bashful. "I think I am hallucinating," Tristan whispered. Sage knocked him in the shoulder. "Hush!" "They were my idea, actually." One of its large fingers began to draw circles in the grass, its attention glued to his assistant. She was charming the thing into a stupor. He could sympathize with its plight. She brightened. "And what a grand idea it was!" She did another curtsy, her head bowed in respect. "We owe you our utmost thanks." She elbowed Tristan hard. He rubbed the spot before frowning, then said, "Oh, yes, thank you." He didn't sound thankful. He sounded befuddled and irritated. The creature's attention went back to him, and it turned cold. "I don't like him." Sage waved her hand and patted its finger. "That's all right," she stage whispered behind her hand. "Lots of people don't." "That's enough small talk." Tristan would stand here, idle, while Sage conspired with a monster of legend. He was the villain, for God's sake. "We are here for a vial of stardust. We needed to find someone who's lost. Someone who can help us fulfill Renadon's story." The creature's large eyes rounded on him. "You want to fulfill Renadon's story, Tristan Maehrer." His stomach dropped into his shoes at the name on the creature's lips. Before he could inquire as to how the creature knew who he was, it grinned, marble teeth shining, as it said words that rattled him down to his misplaced soul. "It took you long enough." Where we at?
9 town.
Cool.
I'm a little zooted. I'm a little warm. Oh, today's great.
Great!
So great.
Chapter 20. Evie. Evie looked between her boss and her new, very large friend. "Do you two know each other?" Her boss deadpanned. "Yes, we have tea every other Thursday." "Really?" she asked, her brow furrowed. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "No, Sage." Rocking back on her heels, she clasped her hands behind her, not missing a beat. "How do you know my boss's name?" The creature shifted, flurrying more dandelion heads about. The wisps of them danced in the air and tickled her nose. "I know all names. I know all things, as nature does." She blurted without thought. Do you know my mother, then? Noura Sage? Where she is? It was a dangerous question for many reasons. The first being she wasn't entirely certain she was ready to face the woman who had abandoned her in a place not unlike this one. A field of wishes. A field of forgotten hope. The second being that this godlike creature could possibly crush her for impertinence, and the third was that her second was still incredibly clouded from this haze of passion she'd been trying to clear out of her mind for the last couple of minutes. Completely, he'd said. No one could be expected to be of sound mind with the tingling sensations his voice had spread throughout her body. Never had angering someone felt so sensual, so wanting, so this needed to stop, or she was going to pin him to his desk when they returned and do something they'd regret. Well, something he'd likely regret. She didn't have the will or the self-control when it came down to the things she wanted, the things she loved, because she loved him. So much so it made her brainless enough to ask questions she still wasn't sure she wanted the answers to. It was fruitless anyhow. The creature frowned, looking at her with a sympathetic mind. I am sorry, Evangelina Sage. I cannot interfere in human affairs. The creature scoffed, brushing its large hand through its cloud crown, which immediately formed again in place. As much as they may need the intervention, it's forbidden. The villain's eyes were on her when her face fell. He looked at the creature and said angrily, That's unicorn shit. The creature shrugged. On this, we agree. But I cannot risk the already waning magic, even if I wish to. This cave is no enchantment, but a price, but a piece of the world and sky that I've stolen and hoarded as my own. The rest of the creators have moved on to paint another realm, but I remain here. The boss frowned. The waning magic, you feel it here? The creature was forlorn. The shift has already begun. You, Tristan Maverick, with all your great power, should feel it too. Your magic is slipping, isn't it? Beginning to fade, becoming defiant. There is something happening to Renadon. As predicted long ago, the humans have become greedy, wielding the magic like it is a thing to manipulate instead of a partner. The creature then pointed to a rift in the sky of its lair. It appeared as if a large piece of it was missing, with a dark void beyond. Oh no, what happened? Evie asked, a sick sensation in her gut as she looked at it. Greed. Humans desire to take. They rarely seek to give. The magic of this world knows this and is beginning to hide to protect itself. The book was written to save it when that time comes. She shifted her gaze to her boss's hands, knowing his magic lurked beneath their surface. But his magic was no longer hiding, not from her. What could that mean? The villain read her thoughts and grimaced as he tucked his hands into his pockets, turning his attention back to the creature. You could have left with the rest of the gods, so why did you stay? Clouds shook above their heads, almost sentient as they rolled toward the creatures surrounding it. I cannot abandon my piece of world, my piece of sky, my cave of stars when the night turns dark. I cannot leave it to hands that will hurt or destroy it. Precious things must be protected. Evie knew that better than most. I understand. The creature looked right at her. Its eyes were like a swirl of lilac color, round and large, making it look almost innocent. I know you do, Evangelina Sage. It pulled a vial from the air, then tossed the glittery substance to the ground in front of them. A token for the kindness man so often lacks. A rare gift harvested from the stars themselves. Evie picked it up and saw glistening powder within. Her heart soared at the sight. Stardust to help guide your way to what you seek. For the daughter of wishing stars. Her eyes widened. The daughter of... The creature gave no explanation, just summoned a cloud from above, then blew a gust of wind the way one might blow a kiss. The force of it caused Evie's stomach to flip until her heeled boots touched down on the surprisingly firm cloud's surface. I wish you luck, Evie Sage. This cave is a wonder of stars at night. I hope you will return to see them. She gripped the vial tight in her damp palm, using her other arm to hold on to her boss, who spoke to the creature with stark confusion. Why does the nursery rhyme paint you as a carnivorous monster when you are merely protecting this cave? Why do you allow the legends to spin you in such a light? The cloud began to soar upward so high that they were face to face with the creature. Then it started to fade back into the sky, its skin melding into the blue. You know as well as I, Tristan Maehrer, that humans demonize what they cannot understand. It isn't our job to educate them, just to live the way we're meant to, with the knowledge that being called a monster does not make you one. The villain nodded, sniffing back emotion she knew he didn't want either of them to see. For what it's worth, I do not think you a monster. The creature was nearly faded back into the hidden sky, the cloud shooting them upward faster and faster, but Evie still heard the echo of the words left behind. From you, Tristan Maehrer, that means a great deal. It's been too long. They're not coming out. You are so negative all the time. Isn't it exhausting? Aren't you tired? I'm preparing for the worst. They've clearly fallen to their deaths. Claire, shut up! They are not dead! As the cloud launched Evie and her boss out of the opening, she wondered if they were about to be. But then they were flailing in the open air. She let out a very unladylike curse as she hit the ground. We're okay, she rasped, pushing up, feeling Tatiana's hands on her cheeks as the healer examined her face. What happened? Tatiana said, eyes moving over to the villain, who was already on his feet, brushing the grass from his person. The sentry was back in front of the cave, but Evie no longer viewed him as an adversary. She was just grateful that the creature below had someone, immortal or not, looking out for its well-being. Everyone should have someone like that. I met the inventor of trees. She sounded as mystified as she felt. Tatiana rolled her lips, looking at her pityingly. Of course you did, dear. Come on, let me examine your head. A low yell sounded from the trees. Blade. Another mouse? Claire gasped, crossing her arms. But Evie saw a flash of silver. Her heart quickened, her palms dampening. No, Blade! She screamed as she stood running for the path, footsteps sounding behind her as the rest of them followed. And when she cleared the path through the trees to the stream beyond, she saw her dearest friend pinned to the ground with a sword at his throat. The valiant guard had found. Where are we at?
923.
923. Cool. Zooted.
Okay, I'm here.
No, wait.
That's fine. It just goes to sleep. It just drops off and goes to sleep.
Oh my god.
That's the cutest thing ever.
Okay. I'm gonna read. Words are not words. Okay. I'm joking. I'm still fine right now. I thought it would be relaxing and help with the headache. It is helping with the headache. I'm trying to see how far. Okay. Yeah. See? Okay. Chapter 21. Evie. If you plan to drive me through with that, could you get it over with? Evie called to the knight holding a blade at her back. Sage, do not move, the villain ordered, hands raised, ready to use his magic. I don't need to move, sir. Can't you see how much he's shaking? She angled her head to look at the sword pressed to her back. It shook along with its wielder. At this rate, he'll run me through by accident. The sword slipped, nicking her. She winced, and the guard's eyes widened with panic. First day? She asked sympathetically. Sage, the villain bit out. It is, actually, the knight mumbled. The villain groaned. Oh, for the love of... Evie waved a hand. Ignore him. You're doing fine. Thank you, milady, the knight replied earnestly. He almost lowered the sword, but was reprimanded by his captain, the one holding blade at knife point, while Fluffy howled beneath a weighted net. The poor animal was blowing gusts of smoke in feeble attempts to produce flame. Simon, the captain yelled, stop flirting with the enemy and retrieve the stardust. Yes, sir, Simon said nervously, tucking his chin against his chest. She held fast to the vial in her pocket, hoping they wouldn't search her first, though, as usual, her fears were for naught. Dark shadows pooled at her feet. The boss's magic. This was the power that was rumored to be strong enough to rip apart homes, rip apart bodies. She swallowed, watching it play with the laces of her boots like a cat. Sir? she asked, trying to shake it away by wiggling her foot, but it merely clung tighter. The villain's face twisted with anger as he tried to pull the mist closer. Obey! He yelled, but it was too late. A helmeted knight had stepped out of the throng with an outstretched hand, the same knight who had subdued the villain's power before he was taken from her last time. She wouldn't let it happen again. The mist about her feet vanished as the villain dropped to the ground, screaming in agony. The sword at her back slipped again. Ow! She wailed overdramatically. I'm sorry, miss, Simon yelped from behind her, sword moving away for a second, but it was enough. She turned, kicking him hard in the shin before pulling her dagger from her side and banging the blunt end against his unguarded head. He dropped immediately. No, I'm sorry, she went, stepping over him, then charged for Tristan. Another knight ran at her, but skidded to a halt when Evie's dagger took on a life of its own. The scar on her shoulder pulsed as her hand parried, and the dagger thrust itself through the man's chest. Her eyes widened. That hadn't been her. Not really, right? How did you do that? Tatiana asked, her hands beginning to glow as she gripped one of the knights by the arm. Whatever she did, it caused the man to collapse on the spot. I don't really know, but I don't think that was me. She exhaled hard, coming face to face with Claire in front of the villain, guarding him. Claire nodded at Evie before pulling a well of orange ink from her pocket. She tossed the glowing liquid out of the well, then wielded and bent the ink through the air like a weapon before splashing it toward the three knights charging them. They dropped, screaming as it burned their skin, the smell of charred flesh permeating the air. Ew! Evie pinched her nose. Three knights remained, one holding magical cuffs as he charged for the villain, but he was stopped by a large green blur that flew out of nowhere, covering the front of the knight's helmet. Get it off! He shrieked. What is it? They all grinned. Kingsley, you are a shameless stowaway, Evie cried. But she smiled too, as the frog held on for dear life, and the knight flailed, trying to see around the amphibian until he tripped, hit his head on a nearby log, and lay still. The knight holding the blade let go, realizing he was sorely outnumbered. And the dragon trainer didn't waste the opportunity. He sprinted for Fluffy, cutting through the netting with gentle purpose and murmuring soothing words to the frightened animal. They were winning, but the boss was still subdued on the ground, the knight with the outstretched hand moving forward. Finish the villain, the injured captain ordered from where he lay against a tree, seething with anger. He had removed his helmet to reveal a drawn face and furious eyes. Do it now! No, the remaining knight said. I don't think that I will. The knight dropped his hands, releasing the villain from his painful vice grip, and spun on the captain, running him through with his sword. The captain's face was frozen in outrage, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth before he fell to the red-soaked grass, dead. The treacherous remaining knight removed his helmet, revealing a pair of green eyes so familiar she almost wept to look at them. The knight smiled, small and hesitant. Well, that was a bit messy, wasn't it? Her informant had come at last. Time? 9:31. Okay, almost out of water. I didn't check it before I started this. Womp womp. It's fine. Chapter 22. The Villain. Wait, I know you. Tristan uttered in absolute astonishment at the man before him. He rarely forgot faces, and though this one had lost the final dregs of adolescence and now angled out into that of a man in his mid-20s, he was still recognizable. I'm honored you remember. It was my first week as a knight when we met in that corridor right before you were, imprisoned, Tristan offered sardonically. I wasn't gonna say that part, the knight muttered quietly. The man had been a recruit when Tristan was apprenticing for the king 10 years ago. They chatted for a bit, all small talk. He'd never even gotten the youth's name. But it had been the first time in weeks that someone didn't skitter away from him, frightened for reasons he didn't then understand. He'd liked the boy. The knight's eyes fell to Sage, soft and grinning. Not anymore. And who are you? Tatiana asked, narrowing her gaze on the newcomer. The knight's expression turned to one of interest when his green eyes found the office healer. Someone who'd like to know you, he said. Tatiana scoffed, rolling her eyes and shaking her head. I could break you in two. The knight gave her a crooked grin. You promise? Tristan watched Claire's eyebrow twitch before he noticed her reaching for the leftover orange ink in her pocket. He gripped her wrist. Don't, he warned. That was until Sage nearly knocked Tristan out of the way, throwing her arms around the knight and burying her head in his neck. Okay, Claire, go ahead, Tristan said, waving her on. Tatiana grabbed Claire's hand when it moved to her belt. The healer looked a little like she was herding two rabid raccoons. Stop it, you two. Good grief. Kingsley landed on Tristan's boot, eyeing the hugging pair. Tristan looked at his frog friend. His frog friend looked at him. A sign slowly crept upward that read, Uh-oh. That's helpful, Tristan hissed, rolling his eyes before scooping up his little nuisance and placing him on his shoulder. Sage separated from the man, finally, but Tristan's pulsing anger worsened when she began fussing over him, putting all her caring attention into brushing back his golden brown locks, wiping a dirt smudge from his cheek. This was what Tristan wanted. He wanted her to develop affection for someone else. It would be easier to not care for her, easier to not think of her as his. But there was a rather primitive part of his mind, and magic, that did not care about any of those things, just wanted to take the knight's discarded helmet and beat him over the head with it till it dented. The comforting thought calmed his heart rate. You were supposed to meet us right after the unmasking. What happened? Sage cried, shoving the knight's shoulder. Tristan's head spun. She'd done it. She'd flipped a hero to their side. Next, she was going to ask the sun and the moon to host a dinner party together, and she'd likely be successful. I was waiting for the right moment to slip away without arousing suspicion. Then, when I heard the king order his men here to steal the stardust from you, I saw the perfect opportunity for a grand entrance. The knight held his hands out in a flourish. Sage rolled her eyes, but there was affection in it. You and your theatrics. The vein in Tristan's forehead was about to break skin when she dragged the knight toward him, unwise of her. But Tristan kept his face impassive. She wouldn't know he was planning the man's death, that he hated him with the fire of 1,000 suns, that he thought the knight a reckless ingrate who needed to be put down, and Sage presented the knight proudly. Sir, I'd like you to meet my older brother, Gideon Sage. Oh! The impassive mask cracked into stupefied shock. That is impossible. Your brother is dead. But when he saw them, The similarities between the two, the same tick in Gideon's lip, the same high cheekbones, the same mischief in the eyes. Her goddamn brother. I'm pathetic. Time.
9:36.
Okay. Feels like I've been here for 10 years. Time is doing that stretchy thing I don't like. Oh, I'm cracking the spine, which is not a grand idea, but I'm going to do it. Makes it easier to hold. Chapter 23. Evie. 2 weeks earlier. It had been a mere handful of hours since Tristan was taken. Lissa was happily settled into a suite in the west wing of the manor, a place Evie couldn't bring herself to linger, not without him. She'd watched Otto Warson's head sway gently with the draft coming in from the front door with a morbid satisfaction. She didn't know how long she'd been staring. She should have been disgusted with what she'd done. She should have been appalled and frightened by her brutal actions, but instead, she smiled. A plan was brewing in her mind, like chemicals melding together to create something lethal. A poison so toxic and pungent it could kill in seconds. But the malevolence was burying something, and as soon as she glanced to the gilded ink ring around her pinky finger, she choked on it. Loss. Tristan lived in every inch of the walls, in the kitchens and the offices, in the decaying heads above, in everything. The manor was him, but he was gone, and she couldn't breathe. Stumbling out the front door, she ran past the manor's barriers, past the safety and protection, past any reminders of him, and dropped to her knees on a keening cry. Fisting wet grass in her palms, she stared at a flower she wanted to tear from the ground. She pinched her eyes shut instead. Too much loss, too much heartache, too much pain. Please, no, please, no, she chanted, the scar on her back no longer stunned, but it tingled as if sensing her distress. The dagger at her thigh warmed in answer. I'll get him back. I will. I'd like to assist with that, if I could. The unknown voice mixed with the wounded ache in her heart, and the combination proved lethal when her eyes darted upward and saw the glinting silver, saw the king's insignia. Whatever was left of her reason snapped like a rotting branch. Gah! She screamed, dagger unsheathed, and ran for the knight, swiping through the air like she was chopping flying vegetables. But hold on, the knight shouted, stumbling back. Just let me explain. But Evie didn't. She kept coming, and when she finally got close enough, she brought her booted foot up between his legs as hard as she could manage. The knight went down with a howl, his helmet rolling off his head into a puddle of mud. Evie blinked, because she knew that mop of hair. She knew that chin, the nose, the green eyes, so like her father's. The night before her was Gideon. Her older brother, who'd she believed dead for the past decade, was laying before her, clutching his groin and moaning into the grass. I deserve that, I suppose, he rasped, breathing deeply through his mouth. His skin was red and tanned and not corpse-like at all. She blinked. You're dead. Eve, Gideon said, climbing to his feet, because he had feet. They moved and everything. They weren't decayed or rotting. They moved quite efficiently as he slowly edged closer. No, She held up the dagger. Stay there! Gideon halted, his throat bobbing as he rolled his lips and rocked back on his heels. I know this is probably very confusing, but if you just give me a moment. Are you a demon? She blurted, then almost covered her mouth to hold the embarrassment in. But what in the Deadlands did she have to be embarrassed about? She was not the one who had come back from the dead, although her plans weren't veering so far away from that. Irony was funny sometimes, and other times it was like someone had slapped you with an umbrella. I am a valiant guard, so you're close, Gideon said with a smile, and a beat of recognition ran through her as the shock began to wear off. She stepped closer, her hand drifting up towards his face, brushing over a faded white scar on his cheek. He'd gotten it from a fall he took while climbing a tree to retrieve her favorite kite. Her fingertips brushed over it, and tears burned her eyes. Gideon? He nodded, tears brimming too, and Evie brought her other hand up and knocked him square in the jaw. What in the Deadlands? She screamed, pulling her fist back to hit him again, but he was already on his feet. Her brother stumbled away deeper into the trees, and she ridiculously followed him. We thought you were dead for 10 years. 10 years! He kept stumbling, trying to keep his eyes on her as he moved back and away from her swinging hands. I know, Eve, I know. Please, let me explain. Did you just throw a rock? Villainous work has really hardened you, huh? She picked up another rock. I'm sorry, he cried. I practiced this a million times, and I'm already mucking it up. Just let me say my piece, and then you can hit me with whatever you want. How about an anvil? She grumbled. The sun was sinking through the trees in a display of muted greens and golds, nearing its descent beyond the horizon, like it didn't want to stick around for this horrendous display. Years ago, in the field, when the light hit me, it didn't actually hit me. Her brows shot up, and she was ready to protest, but he kept talking, likely knowing his time to do so was limited. Remember that fever I got in school when I was in bed for a week? She remembered. She'd had to console her mother and play nursemaid at his bedside, but she hadn't complained. They needed her, and she needed that. I remember. The trauma of the sickness woke up my magic. Father didn't want to alarm any of you until we knew what sort of magic it was. So he called for a specialist while you were at school. It's a magic that sort of suppresses other kinds of magic. Dots were connecting in a very ugly way. You're the knight who messed with his magic, aren't you? They both knew who she was talking about. I had to, Eve. I was following orders. Several of those knights have magic of their own. Should I have fought back, even if I'd wanted to? We would have been outnumbered. We would have been taken away. Gideon cleared his throat and pulled at his silver armor, which was caked in blood. Blood from the knight he'd felled to save her after she killed Otto. I was always going to step in, I swear it. I knew Mr. Warson was a creep. By the gods, I would have liked a shot at murdering myself, but you beat me to it. It wasn't that her knees were weak. It was just that her body was tired of holding the weight of all the realizations. The whiplash of her father's betrayal, her boss's capture, and her brother's revival, all within a 24-hour period. She knew she was chaotic, but this was a bit much, even for her. She sank to her knees in the grass, then sighed when Gideon sat beside her. maintaining a careful distance. I want to help you. I didn't know about father, or I would have. Don't. She cut him a look so mired in hatred that he flinched. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Regardless, the crux of it all was that I was able to save myself that day in the fields, but Mother's magic was unstable and strong. I was knocked practically into another dimension, like actually another dimension for a second, but then I landed somewhere in the vicinity of the Gleaming Palace with practically burned off clothing and no memory of who I was or what I was doing there. Someone pointed me toward Valiant Guard recruiters, and it all sort of spiraled after that. Memory loss. You expect me to believe nobody in the Valiant Guard barracks recognized you when father worked so closely with the king? The king did. This caused her to go silent. He called me Gideon the first time he met me. My memory started coming back around 5 years later in jagged bits. Even when it had all returned, I never revealed that it had. And the king didn't reveal anything about my past to me either. She glared at him, trying to kick her sympathies away. He didn't deserve them. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? She asked, while pulling soft pieces of grass between her fingers. You never came back. We mourned you. This is the most heinous act I've ever seen anyone pull, and I've watched my boss cut someone's tongue out for eating the vanilla candies. Her boss, Tristan. He's gone because of you, she whispered. A tear slid down her cheek. Gideon nodded, eyes getting red as he rubbed at them. I know, but I've come to make it right. I've come to help you get him back. She sneered. Why should I trust anything you say? You've been working for the king for 10 years. I killed one of my own to save you. You think I would not betray the man who stole so many years of my life without a care for the one I had before? He looked so sincere, so serious, so unlike the Gideon she remembered. All I ask is sanctuary when we get him out. When the deed is done, all I ask is a safe place to go. She shook her head and pulled a hand through her hair before looking at him, more tears falling. Why should I give you a safe place when you stole mine from me? And like that, Evie watched her brother's heart break. She wanted to lock him away with her father, wanted him to suffer alongside him. The two men in her life destroying her trust and discarding her feelings like they were flimsy, inconsequential things. But there was a difference between Gideon's eyes and her father's, and it wasn't the color. It was the hope. Pure and honest and pleading. It grounded her. It pulled at her and rooted her like a tree. And despite all her anger and hurt, she felt a little grateful for the brother who had abandoned them reappearing now. She needed a way into the Gleaming Palace, someone on the inside, and if he said he could do it, she'd allow him to help, with the knowledge that at any moment she could have the malevolent guard tear him apart. Gideon was slumped back against a tree trunk, his shoulders hunched. I suppose there's nothing I can say to make this right, but I hope to show you. Can you get me into the Gleaming Palace undetected? The hope in his eyes had gone from a torch to a catching bonfire. I can. I'll do whatever you need me to do. But I will tell you that the king instructed me to retrieve Mother's letters and your, dead body. She smiled. Perfect. Gideon frowned. I don't remember you being this scary. Why are you smiling? Because I plan to give the king exactly that. And so much more. Time.
9:52.
Perfect place to stop. Especially because Dad's in charge of the tea, and he's zooted, and he didn't make me tea.
I didn't realize you put it up there. My bad.
It's fine.
What color is it?
It's fine. It's fine.